Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. As you know, we are facing extreme censorship alongside many other truth seekers out there. If you want to support this show, please go over to mattbelair.com and sign up for the email list, join the membership, and most importantly, consider doing 3 kind acts in the world wherever you are today. Today's guest is an independent researcher in alchemy, spagyrics, and natural sciences. Armed with his telescope, a degree in internet technology, experience as a Marine Corps radio operator, and 20 plus years of direct observation of our skies, he has recorded countless UFOs and anomalies such as the Lunar Wave. As a result of his discoveries, he challenges the mainstream narrative. Using logical deduction and common sense thinking, he and his co-host Jason Lindgren encourage their listeners to question everything during their weekly podcast, Crrow777 Radio. Welcome to the show, Crrow777.
Hey, Matt, thanks so much for having me. We should also mention Rose, Jason's girlfriend, who basically keeps this train on the track, literally.
Oh, well, I appreciate your work. Like I said before we started diving in, I was like, I have to get this guy on the show. You come so highly recommended. I know so many people who listen to your show, love your show. It's so well researched. And I unfortunately haven't listened to as many shows as I would like to because the content is fantastic. And every time I do, it just blows my mind. And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to get him on the show and start asking him some big questions because you do some amazing research. You have incredible guests. And let's just start with a little bit about your background and how you got into this.
In the early 2000s, I was increasingly unhappy working in corporate life. I have a degree in internet technology, so I was doing digital, writing business plans to launch businesses, dealing with all the web kind of aspects of corporation. And we came into that crash, 2006 to 2008, and I'd had it. So I walked away with no idea how I was going to pay my bills. And I decided that I would get out my telescope because that's really what I wanted to do. And I would just start eating rice and beans and filming nonstop. And that went on for about half a decade. And all the things that I realized doing that, the accidental capture of the first lunar wave was in 2017, which was early on. I started shooting in May of that year, or using my scope again in May of that year. By September, I'd accidentally caught the lunar wave. I held on to it for a year. Being a web guy, I never wanted social media. I knew where we were going. As a matter of fact, on my website, the About page was written in 2013, and it is all about free speech. But people kept pushing me, so I took a year of amassed things that I'd shot, plus the lunar wave, the first one, put it on YouTube, and all hell broke loose. And that's basically how it all started.
That's amazing. Well, the Lunar Wave is such a fascinating video. If people haven't seen that, go over to your channel and check it out because it is such a fascinating thing to observe. And you also have this background in internet technology, also in the Marine Corps. Like you know how to do research, you know how to conduct observation, the scientific method. You're very logical in how you approach everything, and your research is very in depth. So let's start with like a softball question. You're one of those people that I'd love to ask, like, what do you think is actually going on here? Because I'm probably at 450 episodes, and I've learned so many things from amazing people from around the world, and you're kind of doing that as well. You're doing intense research, and you're also interviewing really incredible people. And so I would be curious, just your overall view of human history. What do you think is going on here on this planet? Because there's so many theories out there, and I'd be curious where you lean on that. The human origins and where we're going, and then where we're going. Like, what do you think is happening on the planet right now? And how do we navigate this to ideally create a world of peace and harmony? But, we'll see how things trend.
Well, to take the last part of that first, people just have to change their minds. That's all it takes. The tagline on my platform is "Belief is the enemy of knowing." And once you get by trying to throw a fit, thinking that's a jab at your religious ideas, which it's not, you'll begin to understand the importance of that statement. We've come through an age where people believe in things, and that's caused us a lot of trouble. And we're entering an age where people are about to know things. And if I heard your question right, how did we get to 2020? I think was the basis. That's how we got to 2020. People are going to start waking up now, and the human intellect is going to lift. And the control mechanisms that have been in this world for so long are going for the brass ring. They're going to try to control it all. They'll probably end up reducing populations, but it won't be necessarily them per se. Everything's an offer, like this inoculation nonsense. And there's a lot of people still believing in things, and they'll probably accept offers that don't help them. But at the end of the day, we're not going to end. We're human beings. We're the apex concern here. This place was built basically for us, and we will go on regardless of what happens. And by the way, all that we see going on, there's an old maxim that I accept wholly: all created things will see their end. And this whole technology push to try to shackle humanity all over the world, that's a created thing too, and it will see its end. But basically, we have a group of people that have been in charge a long time. Episode 300 at Crrow777 Radio shows you who they are, how long it's been going on. Actually, you can't even see before the time they have had power because they've hidden real history from us. But there it is. So basically, you open by telling people to go out and do 3 kind acts. That's how you change this world. One of the main things that keeps us in the position we're in is the us and them mindset. It's like Sunday night football. Oh, those bastards. I want my team to win. It's ridiculous. And the idea that somehow people on the other side of the world aren't like us, and those idiots just want to strap on bombs and go to 72s. These bigoted, narrow mindsets have to go away. We're all human beings. We all bleed. We're all doing the same thing here. And until we pull it together and treat each other with more respect, we'll probably be in a tough spot. But there are a lot of people waking up to it. And I don't mean just people too. Nature. Got to treat these things with respect. We got to get back to where we once belonged.
Yeah, wow, I love all that. There's a lot of ways that I could go with this. I'm curious your thoughts on the ancient civilizations, and you're filming anomalies and things like that. You've got the Sumerian story where they're talking about extraterrestrials, and things like that. How much do you think that influences where we are now? Like, what's your view on ETs and that influence, from where we are now?
I don't accept the idea of aliens. I don't accept the idea of ETs as it's handed to us. It's part of the Aquarian age nonsense that places like Tavistock really started to heavily insert around the 60s. They even admit it, and they own it. But there are other intelligences, but it's all related to us. So the idea that somehow a gray aliens coming to anally probe us is laughable. There's no evidence for these things, and if you track them back, you'll see how it's done. And when you start to get into your higher mind, simply being aware of a television show pushing the alien agenda, it's transparent. It becomes transparent to you at some point where you realize it's just completely bereft of truth or logic or anything. But there are absolutely other intelligences, and our purpose here, maybe you could view, from my point of view, this place is a bit of a boot camp. I often refer to how we live here in this world as a cycle of hardship and necessity. But I think it's pretty clear, based on what all the older writers had to say and the philosophers and the things that matter in this world, you're not going to graduate until you're ready to graduate. And that can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people.
Wow. So, well, I guess what would your perception on like the whole Anunnaki and the Egypt thing and that whole story? Like, do you think I guess I'm trying to figure out your definition of other intelligences versus ETs, because I know what you mean when you say like the story handed to us and how every single thing is a space movie about these ETs about attacking us, things like that. How do you distinguish between those two, other intelligences or extraterrestrials?
You know, when you see things written in spiritual traditions, you'll notice a commonality where in the West, we might call it an angel. In some of the mind sciences from India and Tibet and places like that, they'll talk about devas and other things. These are intelligences that have to do with our, for lack of a better term, because I don't like the word evolution, there's a hard, fast barrier over us. All my years in telescope helped me begin to see more clearly, where I realized there's no damn satellites. There's not, when I first started, here's one for you. When I first started doing this, if you went on Google, they'd tell you there was 25,000 to 30,000 satellites buzzing around our head. So I use these tools to try to do a simple thing. Use the tracking tools that are available online and film one transiting the moon or something else. And early on, I accepted that that was correct. But what I began to realize is none of it's true. And then when you go look up how they're tracking the satellites, they'll tell you this stuff isn't accurate. Then what's the point of any of it? And then pretty soon you begin to realize that when you apply logic, it all falls apart. So you're telling me at that time, by the way, if you do a search now, there's like 1,500 satellites. So we've gone from roughly 30,000 in 2012, 2013 to a fraction of that. You're telling me these magical astronauts that don't exist, don't have an iPhone, they can't poke it out the window and show us in HD these magical space things doing their magical whatever it is they're supposed to do. And I became to realize that there is endless technology in the sky. If you watch, Jason Lindgren, my co-host, made a movie of damn near every interesting thing I ever shot. It's called Shoot the Moon, and it's on Vimeo on demand. And it demonstrates that there is so much tech above our heads. The thing is the majority of it you can't see unless it's backlit. And a lot of what I did was using the moon to backlight things that I could film. The moon is a half a degree of sky. So that tells you how much is for me to take half a degree of sky and film things. It kind of illustrates how much tech must be up there. But as I went on, places like Huffington Post would take my footage because they call themselves news and can get away with it. And they'd say things like, Crow doesn't understand. This is a satellite in half geosynchronous orbit. So you're telling me, first of all, after half a decade of filming, I don't understand what I'm doing. But that this thing I filmed is 11,000 miles away from me. So I got an optics expert. Dude was a genius. Took my exact telescope, took the exact camera model, the CCD, the difference in resolution between still images and video images, and we calculated as precisely as is possible what a pixel's value would be at certain distances away from me. So if the Huffington Post and their FBI expert, and of course the head of MUFON, I don't know what FBI expert has to do with anything with a telescope. What the hell would he know in the first place? But we calculated I'd be like 5-6 times the size of the fake ISS. And that's when we began to go through my footage and I could demonstrate everything I ever shot is inside our atmosphere. And that's when I began to realize there's a hard, fast barrier. It's almost like the alchemists were playing a game where not only were they telling you how to do all these things in the natural world, but it was all based on the model we are in. You can almost view this place as a hermetically sealed alchemist's flask. Now, the Bible will call what I'm talking about the firmament. The flat earth community would probably refer to it as a dome. I call it a hard, fast barrier, and nothing gets through it. I mean, maybe your mind in meditation. Some people claim when you're sleeping that you get out of here temporarily. I don't know if those things are true, but I don't accept that matter leaves our atmosphere. We're tuned to this place.
Holy smokes. Well, that's some heavy stuff that I've heard before. I don't know if other people have, but I find it fascinating because when I was studying with some of my Native American teachers, they said the same thing. They said there's other life here. There's other intelligences here, but we can't leave. And I thought it was fascinating coming from an elder. They had a 20,000-year history. And so in their perspective on, let's say, other intelligences or extraterrestrial life, for them, it was normal. Like there was other beings here. And it talks about it in Autobiography of a Yogi. So I don't know if it's a frequency thing or what the case is. Like, even if you've never seen a polar bear before, we've been lied to so many times. Who even knows, like, until you go see one firsthand, like, okay, no, they do exist. But there's also, actually, when I was trekking Mount Everest, I figured, if the abominable snowman exists, so I asked my guide, I was like, hey, I was like, have you ever seen a Yeti out here? And he goes, no, I haven't. But apparently my uncle did. And so, who really knows what's going on? But with all of these lies that we're being fed, it's really challenging to discover the truth. And what I'd love to ask is, what traps out there would you recommend people avoid, or some of the big lies, so we can begin to discover the truth? Or what's the process for actually discovering the truth? Because we're witnessing a book burning in real time. Your channel was deleted. I was basically deleted from the internet. Half the videos I saved in researching what was going on with our current events and the all the nonsense with what they're trying to pull off, it's all deleted. A normal person like my dad, or even a regular person who doesn't research all the time, it's incredibly hard for them to find information. So do you have any recommendations for traps to avoid, or how to begin to connect with the real truth when you kind of dive deeper, and a lot of times it just ends up being another false belief?
Well, belief is the enemy of knowing. You have to leave beliefs behind. In the middle of that word is the word lie. There's your first clue. Belief is not your friend. And most people get upset because they think that's a jab at religion. It's not a jab at religion. What you want to do, if you want to start growing up past being fooled all the time and having to scratch to try to figure out if what you're being faced with is true, is you got to throw everything out. You don't know anything anymore. You need to start from square one. Is 1 and 1 2? Let me see. Okay, I can see that 1 and 1 is 2. But in the process of doing that to confirm that 1 and 1 is 2, I also realized that 1 and 1 is 11. No one ever told me that. You need to start to figure out for yourself what is correct. Quit guy in a white lab coat telling you something. Okay, fine. Now let me go see if it's acceptable. Now let me challenge that. And what happens is, if you do that over the course of about a year, it's almost like the chemistry of your brain begins to change. I'm to a point now where I can hear a couple words coming from the TV and I instantly smell something's burning in the kitchen. I may not know exactly what's burning in the kitchen, but I know it's poppycock and I know I don't want any part of it. You get a sense that you've always had that comes back to the forefront, where the ring of truth is not in a thing and you sense that instantly. It doesn't always tell you everything you'd like to know, but once you know there's no ring of truth, why are you still here? Do you want to be associated with a lie, with things that are false, and you separate yourself from it? And so over the course of time, when you learn to reassess, and it's like the political episodes we've done. This is a prime example. The red blue mind virus has done more damage to this country. It's almost made us the laughing stock of the world. And we did shows to show you how that came to be. The central bankers put that in place. And in 1924, Montague Norman came from the Central Bank of England because he was the governor there. They were modeling our central bank on that. And he spoke to all the bankers of America in 1924. And he said, guess what, guys? We got the right-left paradigm political in place. Now we can get these idiots to fight about all this stuff endlessly that doesn't matter while we take over the world. Anyone can look up the Montague Norman speech. And yet to this day, I still get emails of people crying loudly, voter fraud is the biggest. You've never voted for a president in your life. The Electoral College does that. And they've seated plenty of presidents that went against the so-called voting, which is actually polling, which is why they call it a polling place. As a matter of fact, it's gotten so ridiculous that even infantile shows like Adam breaks everything or Adam ruins everything or whatever that ridiculous show on TV was, 3 weeks after we did the red blue paradigm mind virus show, he came on and said verbatim everything we said to a public on TV. And in between, every time he told you why it was fake and all a lie, he said, but go out and vote because it's the most important thing we can do. And it goes to show you how the power of belief just renders us infantile He's sitting there showing you why it's all a lie and then inserting, but voting's the biggest deal in the world. Make sure you go out and do it, after he just got done telling you that your vote does nothing for the highest reaches of what we call politics in this country. And we need to get by these things. And that is basically people acting like children, taking other people's words for what's correct and believing in things. And so you got to grow up, you got to challenge it, and do what an adult human being is supposed to do.
Wow. Well, holy smokes, looking at the history of the central bankers and how things came to be is one massive rabbit hole in itself. I'm excited to check out your episode 300. So I'd be curious your thoughts on my general overview of things. I know that you've been doing a lot of shows on law lately, and I've been doing a lot of shows on law, trying to figure out what's actually going on here. Apparently, it's all consent based. I've had this idea that, okay, that maybe these people are actually Luciferians in the sense that they are trying to trick us to take everything from us, right? So we're not connected to our full power in our own capabilities in consciousness, also with connecting with each other, which I think is the most important thing for our evolution. And I'm reminded again of one of the teachings I had from one of my Native American teachers. They said the next evolution for humanity is peace. And so we keep fighting each other. And so when you get into law, you recognize that everything is a contract, but they've used deception to make you think that you might be speaking a word or to contract with them or all these different things. And so one of the challenging things, I think, that when people start to go down the rabbit hole and they say, holy smokes, there are some people with very bad intentions with it, with an immense amount of power on the planet, they become overwhelmed and they start to feel like this is too big for us to overcome. Like we're toast. This is overwhelming, and I can't believe this is happening. So how do you feel about, in general, what I just shared about that kind of ideology, and how do we move toward actual freedom? And then the final thing I'll ask in this question is, I always think like, okay, well, why don't they just go full authoritarian? Why don't they just take away all our rights and just kill us all without our consent? It seems to be like there are spiritual laws here that even these people won't go against. So what do you think about that kind of rant in your own research?
It's true, and they've tried it. Portions of World War II, which is not what we think it was, or any given war, are that. And they realize that if they come in with steel-toed boots and rifles, there's karma to pay, because if you force living men and women to do things that they don't want to do, you've violated universal law. That's why everything's like you said. You said everything's a contract. I'll rephrase that. It is. You do get into contracts, but everything's an offer, and it's all very cleverly presented to you. And some of it is kind of coercive, like your auto insurance. Right at the top, when you open that thing, it said, here's the offer. So you're thinking, oh, well, this is an offer, I can turn it down. But what happens if you turn it down? All this other pain in the butt stuff happens if you don't accept your auto insurance offer. But the point I would make here is that human beings need to realize that we are the apex here. We take care of this place. We're the top of everything, and we co-create everything that happens here. And that's why belief is such a problem, because we're easily led to believe in things that we shouldn't believe in, and it prevents us from thinking with our own minds and deducing what is correct, and it removes variety. Here's an example. When I was young in the 70s, there was all this variety of cars and the colors of cars. They even had things like a Challenger would come out, and then there'd be a Charger, and then there'd be these other ones. So one of them made its own special purple called Challenger or Charger Purple, I think it was. I forget what it was called. Point was, is all this variety, and one car would come out, so they'd say, oh, well, we're going to compete with that car and try to make a better car. And that only went on, by the way, until about the beginning of the 70s. And then there was fake gas crises and all this other made up nonsense we shouldn't have believed in. But look around you now. Look at the lack of variety and simply the color of cars. And then look at a class of, say, SUVs. You can't really tell a Honda from a BMW from a Hyundai anymore. They all have this very similar look. That is all this variety being removed from the system. And one thing social programming needs is to reduce variety. And so when you get people to believe in things, that is another way to reduce variety, because all 1 million people in the country sat and watched Jerry Seinfeld on a Thursday back in the end of the 90s. So in a normal world, all those 1 million people would have had individual experiences, individual thoughts, individual lifetimes for that period of time. But instead, they all watched the same content force-fed through a black box. Then when they all went to work the next day, instead of all this variety of things that could have been talked about, they'd say, how about that Jerry Seinfeld? Did you hear that joke? What did you think of the grand finale? It's all designed to take control of a mind, get a mind reduced, the variety of minds, and to get them believing in things that are so unimportant and so they shouldn't have a place in our world. A Seinfeld show should have zero importance on what we do in our lifetimes. And yet, when the grand finale of that show came out, I remember I went out that night. The streets were empty just because Seinfeld was having its grand finale. And so these are social programming mechanisms. And we need to get back. It's the same thing as the red blue mind virus. Well, I'm on this team, so these are the things that I believe. Instead, a human being is complex. You might have beliefs that don't fit in either of those boxes, and you should. And when you have all people with a big variety of thoughts and ideas, that is a world that is not easily controllable. But instead, what we've seen is the removal of variety and the sectioning down and the sectioning down. It goes on and on and on. It's all based in belief.
Yeah, well, you make a lot of great points there, and so how do you see things unfold? Like when we look at Agenda 2030 or some of the scary stuff coming out with everything they're doing with the vaccines there, and you research that, and you say, holy smokes, that's not good. If you go back and you understand Rockefeller and germ theory versus terrain theory and hijacking education, and keep going back and back and back, it's hard to even know what history is, because even right now we're watching it get deleted right in front of us. We won't even have an alternative view. So how are we going to remember the truth and know the truth? And so when it gets scary, I think, some people are like, okay, you know what, I'm going to opt out of this system and I'm going to participate in building something better. Do you think it would get to a point where they make that impossible? Or do you feel hopeful that there are going to be solutions where, we can just basically opt out, where we can decline that offer? Or do you think they'll make it so hard that it's impossible?
Human beings have the divine spark. It was granted to us as we came into existence here, and it's a special, special thing. And these guys engaged in trying to slave us all out and maybe even reduce population to get us to accept offers that are horrible, these offers that should never be accepted. They're going to see the end of their time. What drives this right now is fear. The entirety of the supposed pandemic from 3/11, and they love their numbers games, don't they? Their calendar play. It's been, the only contagion has been fear. That's what's driven this. And you see, that too shows that we need to grow up a little more quickly. We're not children in a dark room. What are we afraid of? And yet fear has driven it on and on and on. We're a year in now, and there's a magical flu that doesn't have a season. It goes years. And you're going to need shots for the rest of your life, because if you stand next to a person, you could die. So you've taken the top species and convinced them, got them to believe that somehow we kill each other just by existing next to each other. Quite an insidious thing based on fear, but that will see its end too. And so people can change everything by just stop believing. And when you're presented with things, assess it. Is that right? Is that correct? And if it's not, don't have any part of it. And when that happens in mass, there's no war, there's no revolution, people just stop following directions. This whole thing would fall apart if a couple things happened. If everyone threw their cell phones away tomorrow, this whole thing would fall apart. The other thing is, since we know that's probably not going to happen, if they just quit doing what they were told. A governor of a state has zero authority to dictate anything to the people in his state. And yet, look what's happening. Go out and do this. You got to wear a mask. And when they get called on it, well, it's just a suggestion, but we'll screw with you endlessly. And we'll get the police to screw with you endlessly if you don't listen to our supposed suggestion. When you understand that they never had the authority in the first place, and a lot of people understand that, that falls apart. There's not enough police in the world to make everyone wear a mask. And that's part of what's going on too. They know there's not enough police in the world to get their way. And that's what technology is about. And, it's simple. We just need to get back to deciding whether a thing is true and correct and beneficial. And if we find it is not, then we take no part in it. And these systems fall to the ground.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And one of the ways that I've been thinking about this is just self-sustainability, be able to have the skills and knowledge necessary to provide food, water, shelter for myself and maybe community if things don't go well. And then that kind of makes me think about, the plan of, getting us hooked on the government system of crashing the economy, putting us on a cryptocurrency, and then controlling the food. Whenever I speak to somebody who really understands the law, they're not concerned because they understand to a high degree that these are all offers and we can opt out. And so that's what definitely gives me hope. That's usually one of my first questions is like, don't you think they're just going to go full tyranny and like, basically force you? Is like, no, because this is their system. It's all offer based. And for whatever reason, they won't just enforce it. They might get people to do those things, right? But it's not going to hold, right? Like, one of the people I'm learning the law from, he's going through the border, not, I don't know, doing it basically freely, but one of the times he gets harassed, and even if they detain him, they let him go because they're acting out of line. They're going against their own rules. So it's very important for us to understand what's actually happening so we can create something different. And so this long-winded question is just, I guess, your thoughts on that idea of, what can we do to either be prepared or knowledgeable so that we are helping build something better and not participating in this older system? Because I feel like if we stay in these cities and they come out with the health pass and they drop the dollar and everybody's in debt, it's going to limit choices and it's going to limit free thinking. So I don't know how many people are going to be able to overcome that.
Well, let me go back to where you started to kind of couch in nature. One of the things that's happened to us, and this goes all the way back to the Vatican, accusing people of being pagan, which was a bad thing, when the word pagan simply meant someone who lives and understands nature. They've separated us from nature. As an example of this, I'll tell you how bad it's gotten. On the 17th of March, which is, we're on the 9th today, the actual true equinox will come to the northern United States. The southern United States will be one day earlier on the 16th. When I filmed the first Lunar Wave, I was convinced it had to do with the equinoxes, and it led me on this whole thing to the point where I realized that they're even lying about that. This year, they're going to tell you the equinox is on the 20th. That's not true. It's provably not true. We will have equal day and night in the northern US on the 17th. It's completely as any other logical thing we can think about. If I'm in California, do I see the sunrise at the same time as a man in New York? I do not. The equinox is no different. We're talking about the sun. So that equal day and night will come on the 17th. Yet 3 days before that, they're going to jack up our clocks to further pull us out of nature and discombobulate us. The real equinox is going to happen on the 17th. Then they're going to announce on the 20th, after it's behind us, the equinox is here. But here's the rub. You know what else happens on the 17th, the true equinox? St. Patrick's Day. The man who is equal to all the other saints and the enlightener. It's just code speak for this guy's the equinox. We put this saint here to lead your minds away from the natural world, which is the be all and end all of this place. So you forget the importance of the sky clock, which is the only time we will ever experience here. And it drives everything. When it gets hot, guess what? Sky clock's doing it. When it gets cold, guess what? Sky clock's doing it. When the Great Barrier Reef goes to spawn the third or fourth night after a full moon in November, guess what? The sky clock's doing it. We've forgotten these things and how important it is to be part of nature. Biblically, we're told these ideas in a roundabout way, like all are of the dust and all will return to the dust. We do not exist without nature. And so the separation from nature has been a big part of how we've become so infantile in being afraid of everything and following directions and offers we shouldn't follow. So I agree with you, to get back to nature and learn how to grow things and get back in tune with the natural environment is a huge step to no longer being so easily fooled all the time.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think a lot of people are becoming aware of how, let's just say, useless, we don't know. Most of us don't know how to grow our food. We're reliant on the grocery store. We're so disconnected from where our food comes from. And then when you go down that rabbit hole, with the genetically modified seeds and then the pesticides and all the stuff that we're eating, like this pseudo food, it's like a never ending thing of, unnatural ways of living that cause us harm, and we want to move back to nature. So I guess my follow-up question would be, okay, so if we are able to get to farms or some sustainable land, with some of the crap that I see out there with the chemtrails or even blocking out the sun or some of the other ridiculous stuff, is there limits to what they would do if you were like sustainable in your own land? Like, can they come out there and mess with you? Do you think that would happen, or do you think you would be left alone?
Not if you understand the law. It's the legal ideas, right? If you're a living man or a living woman and you know how to stand as a living man or a living woman and hold your position, their policies don't apply to you. As a matter of fact, if you're ever in court, and so many times we've seen it over and over and over, guy gets dragged into court, judge picks up a piece of paper, he reads a name that's written in all capital letters and says, "Is that you?" There's the dividing line. At the moment you realize that, no, I'm not a name on a piece of paper. I'm a living man. I am me. I am that I am. Everything begins to change. And can they make it hard? Yeah. Can they, put up all these things you've got to contend with and deal with and show up to prove that you're a living man or a living woman? Yeah, it goes on all the time. But when the majority of us, or a good portion of us, have had enough, it will be too much for the systems to deal with. And not only that, you'll see the people like police who do enforcement begin to realize, wait a minute, I've got children. What am I engaged in here? Do I want my children coming up in this world? Think about the generals and the massive industrial army complex types things that are in our world. How many of those people in powers of position are sitting there thinking, my great grandchildren are inheriting a bag of crap? They must think of it sometimes. So the sustainability of what's going on isn't there. But can it get rough? Yeah, we know it can get rough. And it is completely on us. Are we going to remain afraid like children in a dark room, or are we going to grow up and do what adults are supposed to do? What an adult does is it goes into the world and it assesses the environment. Is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Is this helpful? Is this a lie? And get back into the habit of assessing, and then do another thing. Every time you walk out, say a prayer or an appreciation in your mind to the natural world that made you and allows you to exist. When you begin to view the natural world as we once did, the ability of evil minds to fool you diminishes drastically. Where I am, I know, because I looked it up, that the equinox is coming on the 17th and spring will spring. But every year I wait to see the first chipmunk, which I saw 2-3 days ago. There it is, nature proving to me that that equinox matters. And not only that, I saw the crocus come up, first flower of the year every time. Shortly, I know that I will go out and all these yellow flowers called daffodils will go. And a little while after that, I'll see all these other colorful flowers called tulips. How can it be that that little bulb in the ground understands it's time for us to do our thing and to make more flowers? And how can it be that if I understand the chipmunk knows when to come out, and the daffodil knows when to bloom, and some other time the tulip knows to bloom, what about all the people born in those different times in the so-called acceptable year of the Lord? What are the differences in those people? And you begin to realize an underlying truth about what it means to be here that long ago we forgot, because we quit appreciating nature, which is the only thing that allows us to be or survive.
Well, Well, can you expand on that a little bit as far as like how we might be able to use the equinox, and what do you think the limits of consciousness are? Like if we want to gain a real spiritual connection with all this deception out there, what have you learned to create a a meaningful connection with yourself and God, the creator, or however you see that? What do you think happens when we die? And um yeah, we'll just leave it there. I'll probably throw some other ones after.
Well, currently, I accept that we keep going back to the grade we're in until we graduate, which is an unfortunate thought because I have no desire to come back to this place of hardship and necessity 1,000 times or whatever the truth might be. But what I do notice is in all the oldest traditions that fall before the modern edit, where places like the Rockefellers in the early 1900s pretty much got their hands on all the textbooks, the medicine ideas, and they just started shaping it to this foul thing that we deal with now. All those people were of a mind that when a human being dies, the body goes back to the earth and what we might call the soul goes on. But there's also this underlying idea that we have to learn and we have to grow up. And part of it is like the idea of evolution, though I don't accept Darwin or any of this nonsense we've been handed from the kind of circles of British royalty where it all came from. There is a visible, like in my lifetime, from the early 60s to now, I can actually detect that nature has been on an upward trajectory. Here's one example that anyone can think about. When I was in the 70s and skateboards were just kind of catching on, if you would have saw some of these X Game guys, they would have been treated as supermen. But here's another thing. If you saw a bulldog in the 1970s, go get a skateboard, carry it to a ramp, and use it like a skateboard is used on a ramp, people would have lost their damn minds. We see that now. Nature, human beings, everything on an evolutionary trajectory, for lack of better terms. We are going up, all of us. And in terms of what happens when we die, I think the majority ideas are what I accept from long ago. We're going to come back to right where we are until we master it. You know, here's a funny idea. I saw a long time ago one of the guys who helped create Superman, and they asked him what was the idea there, and they said, well, it's clearly the only natural trajectory for a human life, right? Every year we show up at the Olympics, and never is there a year when we say, well, we ran the 3-minute mile. That's it, folks. That's the best a human being can ever do. No, it's always expected that the record will be broken, which is another proof of that idea that we do go towards a Superman outcome. And I think it's provable. I think it's truly logically the only way this goes. We continually improve, go further, go faster, achieve more. That's what human beings do. And that's a big part of 2020. They've tried to put a governor on the race of human beings across this world and retard that governor. That's a lot of what's going on. And who knows what inoculations and all this other stuff they've done piled on the bad stuff they put in our water and the bad stuff they put in our food. It will retard or maybe cause a lot of people to have to go for now. But there will be numbers of us that don't go and numbers of us who maintain, and those will be the best of us. And that will be what creates the generation to come.
Oh, wow. So do you see this as kind of a great awakening when you're talking about the equinox and then the flowers would bloom at that time? Like some of us here, like this is our time to go to that next evolutionary leap. And this whole masquerade is to limit that as much as possible so a group of us don't expand to new levels of awareness or understanding.
Yes, absolutely. They knew this was coming. It's a bit of an age change, whether it's actually, there's so much argument, and our information about the sky clock has been so shuffled around on purpose because it's one of the main things that matters here. Part of what's going on is there's an age change coming from the age of water ideas into the age of air ideas. You can already see it all.